Yeah, and everybody has those moments of inspiration, and sometimes you work with what you got and you create something great. And if people don't love it, that's okay too. There's, people have that old adage like F the haters and all that. It's like, but like the haters are what like keep us moving forward, and for me, I generally did see a lot of the negative response, but Joe has so many followers. And just because 1% of them, 100,000, 200,000, whatever, said that they didn't like it, like, again, nothing against them. It's just like, it is what it is.
Hey, you're listening to the Friends in Austin podcast. I'm your host, Justin Talent, and every week I bring you the stories of the people of Austin. Thank you for listening. Hey, welcome back to Friends in Austin. Today I have Matt Alvarez on the podcast. He has a company called Soundshed Studios. You may have heard of them because he built Joe Rogan's new podcast studio. And it's crazy that you're here, Matt. I highly appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, for sure, man.
So we talked a little bit before the podcast. I figured we'd just kick right into the whole Joe Rogan thing, get that out of the way, and then we'll talk about your business, about podcasting, and what goes behind building podcast studios, and then just maybe talk a little bit about Austin since it's an Austin podcast and you live here. Mm-hmm. I saw that you did an interview with the Austonia, so I know a little bit of the details, but Can we just start from the beginning of how did you get the gig to build a studio? Because that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So my career has been kind of based around audiovisual my whole life. Musician, audio engineer, network, IT, just kind of multifaceted. So over the years, I just, built relationships, have a lot of people in my network. And I lost my job last year, or what was it, right during COVID, 2020, May-ish, something like that. And so we're all grinding, we're all trying to figure out what are we going to do next? Do I want to go for another company? Nobody was hiring at the time. And I also felt man, I just, I have too many things I'm involved in that it just made more sense to start working for myself, if that makes sense. And, started going back to doing like home AV installs. I had sold my studio the year before, so I was kind of getting away from recording studio work. And then just a buddy of mine who's connected with Joe introduced me, and that was pretty much it. Joe needed a studio. I had built them in the past, and just turned into what it is. And I think, it's kind of a funny story because it's one of those underdog stories, right? Who's this dude? Who's this dude from the, the inner city, yada yada.
That's what I love about it, actually.
Yeah. And that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I think it's inspirational for anybody who's looking to do something with their own business and take that leap of faith. Is my wife and I were talking about this last night, and it was really an integral moment in my career, and I think something that we as humans don't necessarily get around to giving much thought or introspection to is you can kind of do whatever you want, and you can be super skilled, but there's a couple different facets of where success comes from, right? Just blatant, relentless work ethic, right? And then there's just general talent, being able to do something that you're interested in and just be proficient in it. And then there's just luck. And I consider myself to be one of those relentless work ethic, I gain the talents as I go because I just want to. And then I just got lucky, man, just knowing the right people and keeping my network open.
I think it's something to think about. And I thought about that too, is I have another friend that was on the podcast, Shay Henning. He makes record players, and he makes really awesome German restored record players. And he did it for a long time, hardly made any money. And then, Jesse James caught on to one of his record players. He messaged him, but luckily Jesse James replied. He bought a record player from him, and then he helped him basically put it up on Instagram, and then his company blew up. So it's doing all that hard work for no recognition really for a long time, and then something happens that, gets you that exposure.
Right.
And some people, you got the exposure, and that's awesome. But I think about that, it's some people just never get the exposure. There's a lot of people doing cool shit.
Yeah, for sure.
And what's cool about being someone like Joe Rogan, I'd love to be in a position someday to where it's I would even seek out those underdogs to try to find people that are working hard or doing something cool. And it's I need something from in that category. Let me find somebody that hasn't been noticed yet. You know what I mean?
Most definitely. Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of monumental in like history, right? Like you're the guy who discovered so and so, and and then from there, you know, you had that relationship, and it becomes something to where like you almost feel not responsible, but you feel like it was like a huge help in like helping, you know, getting them to where they need to be, like at least mentally. You know, for me, obviously, like Joe was a monumental, you know, accelerant to my business. You know, there was no doubt about whether or not I was going to continue doing what I was doing as a, you know, sole proprietor of my company and whatnot. But it was more or less, you know, you get those opportunities, just like you said with your friend and Jesse James. And funny story was like I met Jesse, I don't know, like 7 years ago.
Really?
I did work at his house for a company I was working for, and but you know, at that point in time, I was just one of the lowly, you know, W-2 technician workers, you know. So like I'm not the face of the company. So you know, whatever relationship he had with our company owner was what it was. But to be able to take somebody who's really like hustling and has the grind and they have the work ethic and notice that talent and put them out in the ether like that, you know, whether Joe realizes it or not, like it's been huge for me moving forward since that project. And I think, you know, there's so many people out there who are, I would say, you know, better than me at their own craft. And you're right, you know, they don't get that notoriety or that recognition just because they weren't in the right place at the right time, you know. And the other thing is, you know, we tend to get tunnel vision, you know, when we're working and honing in that craft. We're not looking at the opportunities outside of like, I need to get better at this and then I'm going to get the recognition. You know, it's kind of like, we'll take, for example, like a band, right? There's so many bands out there who are like unsigned, unnoticed, and they're really good at what they do and their music's phenomenal. But there's a way to supplement that talent with other things like building the network and just generally just interacting with more and more people. And like, it kind of becomes this like big, like exoskeleton, like a mesh network where now all of a sudden, you know, so and so, and just someone happens to be somebody who listens to your music and then you blow up, you know, like, and that's generally what we're seeing before the times of like, you know, YouTube and Spotify. You know, it's really important to be able to take those risks and like invest in yourself, but also understand that like your network is an extension of, you know, your possible success.
I think about that all the time because, you know, this podcast is still pretty small, which is even more why I appreciate you coming on. I don't know why people come. I think it's like maybe the production quality and stuff like that, and that I treat it professionally. I don't know if you looked at any of the stuff before you came on.
Yeah, I saw some. It looks good, man.
Yeah. But I think about that, and I try to. I'm a programmer, and I'm very used to just basically working by myself, not talking to people very much, which is odd that I'm doing a podcast. But I like talking to people one-on-one, but it's still weird for me to start like reaching out and making posts on social media. I don't really enjoy doing that, you know, but I love doing the podcast, but if you're going to make a podcast and you want to make money on it because it needs to be sustainable, you have to start learning to network with people like that to open up opportunities and to get known. It's just a necessary thing.
Yeah, that's what I've seen with my career in particular has been always keeping in touch with people regardless of how maybe minute the relationship seems. You know, like maybe I bought an instrument off you from Craigslist and it's like, you know, cool, like this is another human being. I think we tend to, when we leave certain social situations, we almost kind of block that out the moment we leave, right? Like, you and I are talking now, but the moment I leave, you know, how often are we going to think about this conversation moving forward? You know, because you're going to get busy, I'm going to get busy, things are going to happen.
Well, why do you think that is, though? Because I think about that a lot too, and I'm like, man, I should be following up with these people, and I should. But part of it is like, I've talked to friends about it. I feel it's like you get your core group of friends, and you kind of just get nestled into that, and you're like, do I want to start building and maintaining a new relationship? Because you don't really get the reward of the relationship and the friendship until you've done the work to like. If we hang out after this and we see each other 4 or 5 times, that's when we really start like becoming friends.
Right.
But the work to get there is like, well, if you already have like 3 or 4 good friends, it feels like you don't have a great incentive to do that. Other than what we just talked about, it's smart. It's a good thing to do.
and I've had this conversation recently. There's two words that you said, reward and incentive, right? It's human nature to go into any interaction with the expectation of reward and incentive. And by doing so, we're limiting ourselves to the opportunities for growth. And unfortunately, if I went into Joe's project or any project thinking I was going to get rewarded by it rather than just genuinely wanting to do it, I don't think that the outcome would have been the same. Because the perception of it is, I'm doing this service for you, you owe me this. And then from there, there's kind of, you're stifled in the conversations and like the growth you can have like on a one-on-one level, because you're looking at it as that, product, money, interaction. Same thing when you interact with people. And that's how I feel about it, is it doesn't matter what that interaction may be, and you're not always going to see eye to eye to people. But as you start to follow up with them more often, as you start to talk to people, and as you start to get to know them and genuinely care about what they have to say, it's almost like what we're doing right now. Like, why do people have podcasts? They want to get to know somebody, right? They want to talk. They want to get inside someone's head and understand why they do the things they do. And for me, as I move forward with what I'm doing, the irony is I don't listen to podcasts at all. And now I've become somebody who's like sought out to build and design podcast studios. But I think there's a level of personability in anything you do that will be the most pivotal point in your career as a person. How you treat people, following up with them, like taking an interest in who they are. And it's almost like sales 101. But sales is nothing more than just building relationships, and if you're genuine about that, like that's where the success comes from. So hopefully that's not a roundabout way of saying, like, hey, anything you do is really rooted in relationships, No,
you're totally right. There's a woman that came on the podcast, Shawnee Major, that has a company called Will to Click that helps people easily like assign their assets to their loved ones just by taking pictures of it and stuff like that, because the process is complicated.
Right.
So they're trying to streamline it, just like, hey, take pictures, put a name on it. She's really good at that, and she's made a really conscious effort to, like, she came on the podcast, she's gotten me several guests, and it's like she's just doing all, like, she's not getting anything for that, know what I mean? But I noticed that. I'm like, wow, you're really going out of your way. And then that makes me want to help her a lot more. And it's like, I want to put up a Friends of the Podcast page on the website to feature people unsponsored, that I just think are really cool. Or, it goes a long way.
Yeah, most definitely, man. Cool. Yeah. So hopefully, I know with Joe's, studio, that was definitely a labor of love, And the funny thing is, and people ask me all the time about it, how did you get linked up, and like, what did you think, and like, what does he like? And it's so many loaded statements, only because of the fact that, again, everybody's expectation of what it is different. For me, it's like, Joe's a guy. Joe's a normal, he happens to be a very famous and very, well off and, integral part of our, online community and culture. Right. But at the end of the day, I kind of did more of the project just because it was really a cool challenge, to be honest. To have 2.5 weeks to do that podcast studio was, I think for a lot of people would have been scary.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask you. So I know the timeline was short, so let's get into that. Were you nervous?
No, not really. To be honest, like, I had worked on projects in the past, my own recording studio and other projects that were not necessarily so construction based, but just like really stringent timelines, working with WeWork and a couple other companies prior to that. So it was kind of one of those opportunities where I didn't see it for who the client was. I just saw it for the fact that it was like, oh, this could be something really big for my portfolio, and this is something I don't have any other big clients in terms of just like big projects right now. So like, let me just dive in, and I know how to manage a project. I know how to procure materials and do construction. And also, that's all just one little piece of building a studio, right? Like my whole background is in audio and video. So I was like, oh, it just makes sense. But when you say scary, it wasn't really a scary moment. It was more of a like settle in reality moment for me. Because after we had discussed everything, I was like, oh, like crap, I guess I'm really doing this now. There was no turning back.
Yeah.
And so it was really just, reaching out to people I knew who were, going to be super helpful, people who could get through the project with me. And yeah, I mean, just kind of delegating and being like the front runner for everything, and I think generally I wanted to be held accountable for anything that went wrong. So I didn't want to put that on anybody else. And I knew that, that 2.5 week timeline was going to be hard to meet. But if I just made sure, like, okay, I know I'm going to be working 16 hours almost every single day, and some days like straight 20 hours. But, when we talked about reward, for me, the reward was going to be seeing what I had in my head and then bringing it to fruition, like being able to see the final product and be like, oh crap. And that didn't settle in until after we finished it. My buddy Christopher, who was with me on the job, he had to stop me because I was so in my head about all the details and little things that I kind of wanted to fix here and there. And he was like, Matt, like, I need you to just stop thinking, stand in this room right now and just like, look what we just did. And that was the moment I realized, what we had accomplished, and thinking about everybody who was part of that project and being like super, I don't know, like kind of emotional about it, mainly because, a lot of these people were like friends of mine. And
it's cool to get your friends involved in something so neat, like so big like that.
Right. And that was kind of a testament to, my support system, and knowing that I had so many people in my life that were like willing to sacrifice a lot of time and be there to help us like accomplish this. So yeah, I mean, it was a great project. It was awesome. Obviously it's helped the business as a whole, but I think for me, it was that leap of faith I needed to just jump into it and say, I'm going to start working for myself. I'm going to have a company, and I want to create opportunities for like people around me who like believe in the mission and what I'm doing.
So can we get into the specifics of kind of how you engineered it and the soundproofing and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, generally, the structure, if you read the article with Austonian, the structure was existing. It was serving as a room. So I had basically treated it just like any other studio I would have built, without going into detail of material and stuff. It's just a matter of just making sure there's enough isolation and then acoustically treating the room to, negate any weird reflections and things of that nature. Just like you have foam here on the walls, there are definitely very important aspects and nuances of, treating a studio in terms of getting it, ready for any source audio, whether it's dialogue. And I think, with any podcast studio, it's a little bit easier, right? 'Cause we're just talking. We're not playing drums. We're not like wanking on guitar and
stuff. You don't need to master all and level all this stuff, as long as it's not reverberating too much, right?
Yeah, man. You don't have to go into the weeds of like crazy, compression and limiting and gating and all that stuff. You can generally get away with having close proximity mics. So, it was, when it came down to building it out, treating it, it was just, okay, what can we do in this amount of time that's like proper practice for doing this, getting the materials, and basically creating a space that was going to be really interesting to do like a podcast in. And that was, for better or for worse, what you see in the videos was, in my mind, what I thought would look cool. And, Joe and I obviously discussed, the design, and it was really just such a rapid project that we were just like, dude, let's just do something that looks dope. Like, let's do something that looks cool. I'll take care of handling it being a functioning studio.
I was going to ask you, so for the design, you did all that yourself. Did you put it on a computer first, or you just kind of built it as you went? And you're like, yeah, here's how I have it in my head.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's generally, we'll get to that aspect of like the business moving forward after this.
Okay.
But essentially with that project, when you're doing, construction, right? If you're doing any project, generally you get an architect involved, right? And we're just going to take basic, like building processes, right? So you get an architect involved, you go through the bid process, you essentially have your proposals, you say, hey, you gather what the client wants, and then from there you have a team of people who can basically orchestrate, every facet of what that project needs, an architect, design, how are we going to implement this, how are we going to do cabling and low voltage, electrical, you don't have that type of time in 2.5 weeks. You just don't, and I remember thinking about, okay, let me start trying to mock this up and start modeling this. And I realized it was just taking me too much time to like get what was in my head onto SketchUp and like make it a 3D model. So it's like no, like the structure's there. I'm just gonna go for it. Like we've talked about the like some of the design elements. I'm just going for it. And it was just cool because Joe was cool about it. Everything just fell into place. And I think there's something to be said about processes like that are really organic and that just things just happen. Because if we go into the final product and we go into everything that happened after that, like we knew that not everybody was going to love it, and not really knowing prior to that, a lot of like the show and the history, again, I was just doing what the client wanted to do and we just kind of got it done.
I'll tell you, I think it looks dope, man. But I love red lighting. Like my hues in my house, my neighbors are like, "What are your red lights for?" And I'm like, "Those are just my lights." Like, yeah, I like red lighting, so maybe I'm biased towards that. But like, I think it's what you said. People are just so nostalgic about like the podcast was the same for so long. No one likes change. You know what I mean? And it was quite a change. But I think it looks fucking cool, and I think it reflects Rogan's personality and his style too. Right. So I mean,
yeah, and everybody has those moments of inspiration, and sometimes you work with what you got and you create something great. And if people don't love it, that's okay too. There's, people have that old adage, like F the haters and all that. It's like, but like the haters are what like keep us moving forward, and, for me, I generally did see a lot of the negative response, but Joe has so many followers, and just because 1% of them, 100,000, 200,000, whatever, said that they didn't like it, like, again, nothing against them. It's just like, it is what it is, and I will say that being in the space is a lot more impactful than seeing it on camera.
Okay.
And that's why, circling back, that moment when you're standing there and you're seeing what you created, like, is it perfect? No. Like, nothing's going to be perfect in 2.5 weeks. But are we proud of what we accomplished? Yeah, hell yeah, we are. And was Joe happy with it? Hell yeah, he was. So at that point in time, like, why does it really matter? Like, something's going to change anyways. Something's always going to change. And I get it. There's certain things that we grasp onto because we're comfortable with it. But I'm not saying embrace the change, but kind of give it a chance.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. Give it a chance. And I know that Jamie has. So what's Jamie's role? Like, does he set up the cameras and all that stuff, and he makes those decisions?
Yeah, Jamie's the producer, and he's he's pretty much the man behind all the technology. He's Joe's right hand guy, and I don't get too much into Jamie's role just because I know Jamie. I respect his privacy and everything like that. So
hey everyone. This is your host, Justin. I just wanted to thank everyone for listening and give those that are new to the podcast a reminder to please subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast player. If you're on YouTube, please like the video, share it with a friend. That helps us out. Thank you. I was going to say, he seems like a pretty low-key guy. You never see him on a podcast. He doesn't really, like, he's not real public. He's just kind of
like I said, I don't really know, like his whole, anything like that in terms of like personable, life and stuff. But yeah, he's low-key, man. He's a cool guy. And it's just, again, just trying to create a space for them that Jamie could work with, and then that Joe was happy with, and they just kind of take it and run with it. It's just like this dynamic duo, and it's like awesome just being able to interact with them. And
I like that Rogan keeps his podcast, seems to be like really close to home like that. Like he could hire a bunch of people, he could do all this stuff, but like no, he's just been rolling with Jamie for a really long time and just keeps it really personal.
Yeah, dude. And that's a testament to, how there's two like sides to the coin, right? You have these huge like productions where you have all these like people on stage and key grips and lighting guys. And you know, you've got the audio guys, and then you've got, you know, the talent, and then you've got something that's massive, right? It's a monumental like podcast where it's just
really two dudes.
Two dudes. It's chill, man. Like that's cool, right? Like that
it is cool.
You know, this could turn into that someday, you know, like two dudes, two mics, you know, it's like
two dudes, two mics.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of all I really have to say about it. I mean,
I think that we covered quite a bit of it. Yeah. So I wanted to get into, you know, your work history, and you said that you'd worked for other companies before and you got laid off. Like, were you into music yourself personally? Do you record?
Yeah. So, I would say like 2010, 2011, I had built my own personal recording studio out in Cedar Park. And, I had been, you know, playing in bands since I was like 15, and, you know, I was going on the road. We played a couple tours and like played a bunch of shows, and got kind of burnt out on that. You know,
what kind of music did you play?
Oh man, it was like metal, hardcore.
Nice.
You know?
I like metal.
Yeah, it was just, you know, just super out there, nothing that was going to pay the bills.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I realized early on. I was like, oh crap, like I'm not making any money doing this. I'm spending like $200 to go play a show out in like Louisiana, or, you know, something crazy like that.
It's a passion thing.
Yeah.
And you're like, I can't really scale this. I've got, you know,
right.
responsibilities.
Oh, for sure. I mean, at that time, I didn't really have any responsibilities. I was like, oh, I think I would like some responsibilities. So like, let me figure out how I can, you know.
Do you have kids now or anything?
No kids yet. Mm-hmm. But yeah, at that time, I just kind of determined didn't really want to play in bands. It's too much to try and create like a band. And then, you know, it's like a relationship. You have to really like work at it. And I just got kind of burnt out. So I just determined, at the time I was working in healthcare of all things. Like I worked at this doctor's office, and I kind of slowly moved in from like doing, just general like chart room work to moving into IT. But it was, the story's pretty funny because I had done audio, like running sound and things like that. And I always been like interested in it just by nature of being a musician. And then when I was working at this doctor's office, I kept collecting this like insulation foam that we used for like packing materials for like the pharmaceutical drugs. And this foam came in like these blocks, like 1 foot by like maybe 10 inches, or some of them were like 24 inches by like 20 inches. It's really thick. It's like what you see on the walls. It's just polyurethane.
That shit is so hard to keep on the wall, by the way.
Yeah, it's
it's a fucking nightmare.
Yeah. I can show you some ways to make that happen.
Please.
Yeah.
Please.
So I had collected so much foam, and I had all of my equipment. And this is going to be funny to like people who watch this episode, but like I had moved back home. I was like 21 or something like that. Obviously, because I didn't cut as a musician. But I needed somewhere to store all my equipment, like my half stacks, my drums, all that stuff. So I put it all in this storage unit, and I just stacked up all this foam that I had collected over like a couple years.
You're just collecting this foam for 2 years. Did you know what you were going to do with it?
I didn't know what I was going to do with it. that was the funny part about it. I was like, I was thinking like, oh,
you were just hoarding foam.
Yeah, I was like, this foam is valuable for some reason or another, but I got to keep it, you know? And I had it in the storage. And I remember after the band broke up, you know, I had a buddy of mine. And I said, hey, dude, like, I've been collecting this foam forever.
And he's like, hey, dude, I know a therapist.
Yeah. He was like, I don't know what you want to say. No. But and then I told him, like, I have this wild idea. Like, you know, the storage we're collecting in it? Like, what if we built a recording studio into the storage? He's like, what do you mean? Like, we put the foam on the wall? It's like, no, like, what if we actually build, like we frame it out, like we build an isolation booth, we build like a control room. Like at this time I had no idea how to do this. I had just the idea in my head. I was like, okay, like this would be a cool thing to do. I still want to do music, but this is a different like way to do it. And he was excited about it. I was excited about it. I started like buying a ton of like random gear. I didn't even know what I was really buying. I was like, I knew I needed a mic. I knew I needed an interface. And then we just kind of went to town, man. We had like a power drill, and then we would go to Home Depot, pick up the wood we needed, but we would have them cut it at Home Depot for us.
Yeah. They'll cut it for you.
Yeah, they'll cut it for you.
As long as it's a simple cut.
Yeah, if it's a simple cut, they'll cut it. So we just like framed it out the best we thought we could, built this like wall on the ground, stuffed it with the foam, which was about 4 inches thick. And so that's how we built it. We built multiple walls, freestanding, and then we joined them with these little L brackets. But I'll tell you this, man, like those walls were like 400, 500 pounds a piece.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because they were full 8 by 8 foot walls. So we had to get friends and a bunch of people to help us lift this thing up. And so, yeah, by the end of it, we had one storage unit. It was like a 10 by 12 foot storage unit with this like 8 by 8 foot box in the back of it. And that was our isolation room. And then we
was it very effective as an isolation room?
It was insanely effective.
I bet it was, dude.
Like, it was insane because you could hear people like opening. You wouldn't be able to hear people opening their like storage room doors, those big metal doors, like if you were inside that room.
How hot was that thing though?
It actually didn't get that hot.
It didn't get that hot?
No, it was crazy because it was climate controlled.
Oh,
so
it was
like,
a climate controlled unit.
Yeah, it was inside a climate controlled unit. So, you know, it would really like seal in, you know.
It would even insulate it even better.
It would insulate it even better. So as long as we left the door open during like session, like when we weren't using it, you know, we would have cool air in there, and we double doored it. You know, we weather sealed everything. And so the outside, the rest of the space in that room was our control room. You know, I had a studio desk. I had like an all-in-one PC at the time. I started collecting gear, and then from there, you know, I just kind of kept growing and growing, and then we went into another storage unit, and we ran cabling from one storage unit all the way to the other one down the hall, and it grew, and then from there, I realized that, you know, there are a lot of things that people do in this life, and they're apprehensive about doing it because they're kind of afraid of failure, or they don't know where to start. I don't have a college degree. And I knew that was something important to my parents. But for me, I just wanted to figure things out on my own. But the beauty of the age we're living in is the information is readily available. So knowing that was there and having help from friends and like family to accomplish things, you know, like I'm fortunate enough to like have that privilege to be able to like ask people for help. And I will attribute that to like a lot of my success as well. You know, like I am humbled by the fact that like I have a good network of people, but also knowing that I can find all the information I needed. You know, I started learning how to engineer, and, you know, obviously building this room. And as I learned and I grew, the second room was even better. You know, we built like an ISO room with like actual glass that you could see into the room, and like we offset the glass, and we had double pane. We had all the cables like routed through the wall. And
so
like,
were you renting them?
Yeah, we were just renting these storage units. Dude,
yeah.
We spent $450 a month on the storage units, on 2 storage units. Like, that's insane. Like, the overhead was so cheap.
Yeah. And then what were you getting renting them? What were you getting like renting them over the top? Like your overhead's $450, like you.
Yeah, so like I was working a full-time job still at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was still with that doctor's office, and I think like on a good month I'd be making like $1,500, $2,000.
That's
like
sick,
on
dude.
the side, like recording.
That's awesome.
And getting paid to like figure this stuff out, right? And you know, I got more and more proficient in it, and you know, so my career kind of just was really rooted in pro audio and studio audio, but constantly, you know, and even in IT, and then constantly wanting to learn more. I was like, at a certain point, I started not losing interest in it, but realizing I was like, oh, this is interconnected with like low voltage and IT, and like there's new technology coming out to where like I can integrate it in everyday life, or like maybe I just want to like remodel the whole studio and add a couple cool things, cameras and things like that. And then I got let go from my job at that time. I had just gotten married and moved into home automation.
Oh, home automation's fun, man.
Home automation is a whole nother world. It wasn't intimidating, but it was so different. Like having to learn how to like, you know, build the infrastructure cable wise for like a smart home. And this was before the time like Philips Hue was out and all these like Wi-Fi and Zigbee connected devices.
Yeah, that's made it a lot easier.
It's made it so much easier now, but back then everything had to be hardwired.
Yeah, and then people would have like this huge central hub, right? That you'd have to hide somewhere and make it look pretty, and then run all the wires.
They'd have a whole
shit.
AV rack in a closet hiding somewhere in the house. And that was pretty cool because, you know, that was another aspect of AV like I never considered. So I started working in that. And then, you know, from there just started moving to other places, you know, going back and forth from design and implementation to being the client, and kind of generally learning how both sides were done, right? Understanding what the client's needs are from being the client, and like, you know, managing projects that we needed and hired out for. And then the opposite side, like selling to the client and like getting like figuring out what their needs are and then designing the system for them. And so I did that, you know, moving into commercial AV, and then working in school districts, and then working for WeWork was my most recent career path.
Yeah,
And,
they were blowing up, building all over the damn place.
Dude,
so there's probably plenty of work there.
Yeah, it was nuts. I was the North American AV engineer. We had a bunch of people on our team, and so our job was to go out to sites that were being built, because we were the employees, and ensure that like all the integrators and the vendors were like actually doing their job. So we were traveling everywhere: LA, New York, Nashville, Miami. Like this was that August to like December before COVID was a thing.
And then WeWork got a bunch of press and kind of crashed. Yeah. And there was like I don't remember, there was some kind of, I don't know. Some people were saying some stuff about the owner of the company.
Yeah, it was funny seeing it in real time, like happening.
And saying it was very cult-like too. Like WeWork was, yeah.
I'll touch on that just like lightly.
Okay.
So I was speaking to somebody literally about this a couple days ago. And for me, being an AV kind of IT guy, like our whole culture is very like cynical. We're kind of
I'm a programmer. I know how.
Right. So you know how we are. Like we're just generally like, oh, like all this Kool-Aid around, we're not drinking it. Why are people happy about anything? Like that's just how it is. But the crazy thing is like moving to WeWork was kind of the same initial like thought process I had going into it, because like every career or job I had before that was mainly rooted in like other people determining my worth. Like this is what we're going to pay you because you have X amount of knowledge, because this is the value you bring to our company so we can be more profitable. And that was something that I've had to talk to some of my friends about, because it's like in every industry, it has a different effect on people. And I think in the IT and AV industry, for us, it's like, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of hours, a lot of like back, we're doing stuff behind the scenes, but we never get the notoriety or like the praise or anything.
Yeah, everyone just wants it to work. Like,
they just want it to work. Yeah. And if one thing that like isn't our fault doesn't work, then we're still the guys who like screwed the pooch on it. So we moving over to WeWork, it was a whole different culture, and I think that's why it was so successful. It was not the fact that it had like an identity crisis, like are we a tech company, are we a real estate company? Like it was more or less the fact that like you felt like you were part of something bigger than just your role. And that I think was I think that was the perspective of it being a cult, right? Is the fact that like there's so many things going on. There's so many people talking about it. It's branded everywhere. You can't go anywhere without hearing about WeWork. Funnily enough, I never heard of a WeWork before I started working there.
It's crazy. And I had several friends that were working at WeWorks before, everything hit the fan.
But I think the more I spent time there, the more I felt like what I was doing made a difference. Whether or not in the grand scheme of things, anybody else agreed with that, it's just like internally, the employees were always really like supportive of each other, always felt like, hey, like we're in this together. And that was a really cool feeling. Like that's kind of a unicorn. You don't always get that in your career path.
That's very true. A lot of the people you work for, you don't feel that connection to what they're doing.
Exactly.
It never lasts. When I know that that's the case, it's like, this isn't going to last.
And then from there, you can't invest yourself into an employer that doesn't make you feel like you're part of like the overall mission. And I think that's what they did very well, was create a mission. That mission was such a gray area that nobody knew what the hell it was, but that creates a really good environment for at least the employees.
That guy was so gung-ho on that, and you're right. He even approached Elon Musk to try to get a WeWork on Mars. And Elon was just like, no, we need to get to Mars first. Like, forget about this. Like, chill out, dude. But it's like keeping that momentum going. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that's anything, even with, I'm going to kind of move into where we are now, and this will just be a little transition into it. But since the project, with Joe, and since leaving WeWork, it's given me this like valuable insight into how to grow a business based on the culture more so than the revenue. And maybe some people skewer me on that. Maybe some people say I'm ignorant, because I'm not focusing on like how to maximize, profitability. But for me, being in the right place at the right time was a perfect opportunity to create other opportunities for people who wanted to feel like they were part of something bigger than themselves. And there is no way I could have gotten to this point without my, we'll call them, venture partners. These guys are, Drew, who did the custom desk for Joe.
Drew Teague.
Drew Teague.
Is it Wrightsmith?
Yeah, with Wrightsmith. As soon as that project was over, that was the first time I had met him. And I saw the work he did, and I was like, man, this guy's really good. Like the attention to detail, everything was like super clean. And I looked at his social media, and I generally tried to see what his core competency was, and it seemed to be like woodworking and modeling and stuff, like 3D modeling and stuff. And so I reached out to him on the next project that I landed, and it was for another gentleman who had a podcast studio here in Austin. And I asked him, I was like, hey man, do you want to partner up on this next one? Like I'm not the most proficient at, woodwork and millwork and like custom stuff like that. And I could use somebody who could take these designs and really help me bring them to life. And he was like, yeah, man, let's do it. And he was super cool. Like it was crazy because, I didn't know this guy other than our interaction here and there, like over at Joe's. And, turns out like, yeah, man, like we're both musicians. Like we both, listen to like Motown soul music. Like that's kind of like the thing that we do. And just working on the job, getting to know him was like, hey, this is really awesome. Like I've got some other opportunities. Like let's start talking about what's going on there. And then we brought on, I needed another kind of like tech guy, like AV engineer. So I called up, or somebody who had worked on one of my WeWork projects hit me up after seeing, the Joe story. And he was like, hey man, congrats. Do you remember me? We worked on this new building. And I was like, yeah, dude. Yeah. What's going on? And we sat down and we had discussed working together to some capacity. And at the time, and this will tie into the whole, support system here. At the time, I didn't know that I wanted to pursue what I was pursuing. When you put in 240 hours into a 2.5 week project, like you're like mentally almost broken at that point. And it was just basically me doing it to myself, saying like, man, like I overworked myself. I really wanted this to happen. And
it's an intense thing. Yeah,
for sure. And I was just super conflicted on the whole thing. So when I sat down with Andrew, his name's Andrew Lloyd. He has a company called Tech Savvy. We had a conversation. I remember at that time I was telling him, I was like, man, I don't know, like if I really want to pursue this. Like I'm really tired. Like I don't know if I can go through that again. I told at the time I was doing videography work. My wife and I were doing a lot of wedding videography, music videos and stuff like that. And I was really enjoying it. I was paying pretty well. And so, yeah, I was just...
Dude, your start was building foam things inside of storage containers. You considered to be done with this after that?
Well, yeah, because it was, everybody... There's so many things that happened after that accomplishment. Like just the general, like, hate I got online.
That really affected you emotionally?
I think so. I think, not necessarily... I guess emotionally in a sense, but for me, like, again, I don't do things just because, like, I see the big payout from them. I do them because I genuinely want a challenge that like I can be proud of. I think that affirmation fuels me as well. And I'm like, hey, like I just want to be able to say, like other people to say, like, dude, like I know it's not perfect, but like you did it. You know what I mean? Like you got through it. But nobody sees that, right? People take things for face value. And I think that's what beat me up was all like the comments online being like, yo, this sucks. This looks terrible.
Take Joe's advice. No, never read the fucking comments. Yeah. He says it all the time, but no, I understand. Yeah. But it's a passion project for you. Right, for people to be you saying that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if anybody takes anything from this and like, if anybody watches this that had seen or had posted those comments, for me, I would just say, look, I get it, man. Like it's not your thing. Right. But at the end of the day, like put yourself in that individual's situation and be like, would I be able to deliver this better? And even if you say you could, like, would you actually do it? And so that, going back to that meeting with Andrew, like I had already kind of determined that like I wasn't sure whether or not I really wanted to like pursue it. But then, more and more business kept trickling in. And they were like, hey, we saw what you did for Joe. Like, we wanted to talk to you about doing this. And kind of realizing that like a lot of people had this same need. A lot of people needed somebody to not only just like get them where they needed to be to start a podcast, but really like design the space, integrate the audio visual, do some custom work to make it like really like just personalized. And as I started talking to more people about whether or not they wanted to be involved, it started to kind of come together. You know, once we did this project for this guy Alex, and then we got another one from his friend that he had recommended. Um, I started to feel that it wasn't necessarily me that was being unmotivated to do it. I think it was the fact that I was kind of craving that collaboration that I had from companies like WeWork, and just the camaraderie I had during Joe's project as well. I was like, that's what's missing. It's not, you know, the affirmation was nice, but I think it was more having a team of people who believed in the mission, who brought value to the table in their own regard.
That brings a lot of spirit to the whole process.
You know, because anybody doing something alone, even if you're in IT and you're the guy sitting in the basement, like just coding or like doing, you're like, that affects you.
It wears on you.
It wears on you, you know? And like even people who are super introverts still need some sort of interaction. And I guess that would be like a smaller version of what I think I was going through. And so when the projects kept coming and then I started bringing more people on board to help, like seeing their excitement and seeing their enthusiasm, I realized it's like, okay, like we're doing this now, ball's rolling. We've got a ton of like people calling us up to do this work, small projects, bigger projects. And we're delivering these, you know, products that like the client's super happy with. I was like, okay, like what do I need to do now? You know, it's not even about me anymore. Like it's more about like, how can I create enough opportunity and upside for everybody who's involved? Because of course, like when you say Joe Rogan, anybody would like say, dude, I want to come work with you, blah, blah, blah. But I think the most important thing about your team is like liking who you're working with, right? Like even if they don't like, even if they're the best, you know, designer or engineer or architect or whatever it is, we all know somebody we work with who's like, dude, I would never hang out with that guy at a bar.
Yeah.
You know?
Even if they're really talented, it's like, yeah, you need to have that good rapport between everybody.
Yeah. And most companies, they'll seek out the talent before they seek out the integrity because it's an easy fix, right? It's like it can get you the result right away rather than investing in an individual who may not be proficient in anything, but just seeing like the potential and saying, hey, like I want to be around somebody who believes in me, so then I can, you know, also invest in them because I believe in like us growing this whole thing together. And that's what's kind of gotten us to this point is everybody around me has brought something different to the table, but we'll hang out outside of these projects. And like, we literally just want to like be around each other and collaborate and think about this stuff, you know?
Dude, that's a great result that came out of that. I mean, you made some friends out of it.
Yeah,
and you've got this company moving forward and you've got cool people to work with and you've got lower pressure projects to work on.
Well, kind of. I mean,
I'm sure some of them are big. I mean,
well, we're working on Joe's new one right now.
Oh shit, you've got one in the works?
Yeah. Well, he's mentioned it on the podcast. I think it was like a couple podcasts ago. He had already talked about we're doing the new one. And then we are currently getting contracts worked out with Tom Segura as well.
Nice, dude.
So yeah, I mean, we've got these other high profile projects going on, but then, you know, we're getting calls, you know, weekly, you know, at least 2 or 3 just from, you know, local guys, like local people who want to either have like a music recording studio.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is it music, podcast, both?
Music, podcast. There's people, you know, I had spoken with like a mortgage company locally. They're like, hey, you know, we need to elevate our podcast production. You know, we don't know where to start. We're not sexy because nobody wants to talk about mortgage. I was like, dude, that is not true. Like we could totally make mortgage sexy. We just gotta kind of rebrand.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so we've been really fortunate that we've seen an influx of different areas in the market. I would say what we do best though is the fact that we have everything in house now. We brought in a construction manager, a GC who I've known for a long time and haven't interacted with in a long time, but he's a really great guy, Dylan Elm. And so that's really awesome to have on board, because when we have clients who want to build a recording studio from the ground up, the whole process is, quality controlled in-house, so there's no like miscommunication. There's no, hey, you didn't run my conduit here, or hey, like, why are these walls finished out when they're supposed to be open, stuff like that. It's the perfect opportunity for anybody to just call us and say, this is my vision. I don't want to call like 4 or 5 different vendors to make this happen.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to be really doing that I don't think anybody else is doing.
So for example, it's like if I wanted to build a new structure outside, you could do the whole thing, or instead of me having to call like whatever these smaller builders or people that add on to houses and then do that, then call you to come in and do everything. You guys are going to streamline that whole thing.
The whole process is streamlined.
Man.
So, Dylan's background is, residential and commercial construction. And so when we were going into it, I realized, like I'm not the guy who should be doing the construction. Like this guy's way better than me, and it sometimes it just takes me too long. So it's like, I think every entrepreneur or any successful business owner, says that, right? They say like, surround yourself with people who are smarter than you or better than you at what, at certain things, and supplement those skill sets that you shouldn't be focused on. Find what you're good at, your core competency, and run with that, and then build a team to, expand from there. And so that was something that I saw as a need, because every single studio we went into, we needed somebody to really knock it out of the park and like be able to manage time and be able to like get those things finished, so we could focus on just making sure the client was happy with the product, and then making sure it worked, right? In a lot of instances, even without just the whole process of building and designing, most of the time the client is intimidated by the technology.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, just getting all this stuff set up is like,
I guarantee you, like someone who's never seen this is going to walk in here and be like, oh, I wouldn't know even what button to touch. Ha 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 ha. Like I've had that a million times. People have come to my studio like, dude, this is like a spaceship. How do you know what like buttons to turn and stuff? And it's like, you know what? I don't expect you to know any of this. Like, you're here to record. Let's vibe out. Yeah. And that's another thing I realized. It's, when I come into a situation where someone's got a podcast studio and they don't know where to start, the last thing we should be talking about is the technology. The first thing that should be on like the forefront of anybody's mind is creating a really cool space to have a conversation, because that's essentially what we're doing here, right? We're having a conversation. We're getting to know each other. And like, that's got to be a comfortable environment to do it in, or at least cohesive to like maybe what your podcast is about. If we're talking about like doing some sick reps, or like we're like in the gym or something, you know what I mean? Like,
there might be some iron behind us or whatever.
Right, yeah, some like really industrial facade, or making like some really cool indirect lighting and stuff like that. And that's really the exciting part about it, is taking the personality of the host and saying, like, what are you about? Like, let's get to know you and figure out like how we can like encapsulate this room into like your like ideas and your personality. And then from there, the technology is the easy stuff. Integrating it is I'll be honest, it's the easy stuff, because we can figure that out. But nobody's going to generally see a podcast and say, oh man, is he using SM7Bs? Like, man, that's crazy that he knew to use those.
If
mics.
You're a podcaster, like, maybe, but but the vibe is everything. And I want to give it a shout out to my buddy Dave Lehman, who did my studio. He's a really nice guy.
Sick. Yeah, Dave did this wall back here.
Yeah, he built that door. Yeah,
dude, that door is sick.
Dude, he built it in the garage. We realized it was way too fucking heavy to get upstairs, so he had to deconstruct it, carry it up piece by piece, and reconstruct it upstairs.
Oh, that's nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so vital, right? Because this is like signature for you.
Yeah, it is. It is.
You know what I mean? Like, people as you grow, people are going to see it and be like, oh, like they're going to scroll through like Facebook or Instagram, and they're going to stop because they see this one thing. And that's what we're trying to create with our clients as well. Like, what is it that's eye catching? Because like, if you look at the metrics and you say like, how many people are looking at your post and looking at, your social media, like most people are just scrolling, like no one's spending more than, like 3 to 15 seconds looking at any post. It's just the nature of how we are nowadays. But can you imagine like scrolling through your feed and then seeing some like crazy lighting or some crazy background, like backlit, and then just like an elevated, making sure that the focal length is right and the perspective of the camera, and then you click on it and oh shit, the audio sounds really good too. There's kind of a shock value to that. It subconsciously draws your attention, and you're like, whoa, this isn't just the everyday thing I've just been scrolling past every day.
For sure. And you're trying to get someone to click on two people talking, which, let's face it, isn't that exciting until it takes some investment. You have to stop and listen. Exactly. It's like build context of what they're talking about. So it's like podcasts have a lot of work to do up front to get someone's attention and to keep it. So the last thing you want to do is have bad production and bad quality and bad audio. Like, you need to do everything you can to get that person to click on that and see it.
And there's still people who are like first to market with podcasts, right? There's people, like even let's say like Lex Friedman. People have asked me multiple times, like, "Hey, you're gonna be chat to Lex?" He just has that black background and like a table.
It's his style,
right? But it's really he has something super compelling to say that people are like listening to. Mm-hmm. And maybe again, it was just like generally he knew the right people, or like like it was the right place at the right time. But not everybody's gonna be that lucky. So. Right. Well, it's really more about like how do you set yourself apart? Just like anybody, like a band or a model or a company. What are you doing differently that's gonna like compel people to want to listen first and foremost? Because we could be talking till we're blue in the face about something. Maybe we know the secret to black holes. Like we actually we know somehow we went on like some crazy like shroom trip and we're like, dude, we figured it out. But no one's going to know because they're never going to click on that video if they see us sitting in like, a living room in a house or something. So that's, I guess that might be like marketing 101, right? Like how do you get people to invest, and how do you quantify that metric as well? That's one thing that I'm hoping we can get to a certain point with our clients as we move forward, figuring out like the ROI on taking your podcast studio and really elevating the design and really elevating like just the nature of the content.
I'd be very interested to find out more about that as you go forward on that. Yeah,
so that would be cool because then we can justify it and say, hey, I know you invested, $40,000-$50,000 in this, bedroom of your house, but like, how many more like viewership have you garnered? Like what is, what's your engagement at right now and stuff like that. And so there are a couple, with Alex and obviously Joe and another gentleman named Nick Bay Early, we've finally finished out their studios, and they have very high traffic. Like the nature of their businesses are very high traffic, like viewership, like subscription based models. And so I'd like to go back and figure out what those like numbers have started looking like, and if it's changed, because for some people they just want a cool space, right?
Yeah, I mean, because if you're going to be doing your podcast, you want it to be fun. That makes it more fun,
Right, for sure. Mm-hmm. But other people, they're spending a lot of money, so they expect like, hey, I want to see what type of return I can make on really like, taking, I'm hiring you to give me a product that I'm hoping will get more people to like be interested in what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So
I feel like the burden is on them, though. It's like you build 6 spaces. It's on them to build their podcasts and get people to listen to it. Of course. It would be nice if you could help with that. But
and I don't think that will ever necessarily help with, like how do we build,
you want to show metrics though, because it helps in sales and marketing.
Right. Yeah. It's like, I'm not a record label for a band. I'm not like the PR
firm. You're not going to help them promote their stuff.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it would be nice to know that, because I want to see, because people have asked me this before. They're like, what do you see as the future of podcast? And circling back to the beginning of this conversation, I don't even listen to podcasts, which is crazy. It's ironic, right?
You gonna listen to this one?
If you send it to me, I'll listen to it. Yeah, I listened to the last one I was on. I was like, man, do I really look like that? I was like, man, that's terrible. But I would be curious to see, for me, the future of it is like, investing more. Anything you do, if you invest more in yourself, you invest more into like your production. If we even look at things like videography, right? My wife and I shoot these wedding videos, and I'll go back and I'll look at videos from like the mid and early 2000s that people did. And it's just crazy, because even back then people were spending like mad cash to get a wedding videographer. And I'm looking at it, it's like, that looks so antiquated. That looks so bad.
It's crazy how fast that stuff changes.
Right. And even in cinema, how many people are going to go watch like a film that looks like it was shot on like 35 millimeter or something like that. You know what I mean? Like they're going to them, it's going to look like an old film.
Mm-hmm. I can watch like a Clint Eastwood film that's old, like The Good, Bad, the Ugly,
right,
all day. But some of them are just, yeah.
Well, it's not that it's bad. It's just that we're not used to seeing that anymore. Mm-hmm. And then the same thing's going on with podcasts, right? Everybody's really wising up to, you know, Twitch streamers, right? Everybody's really wising up to like, okay, if I have a much better camera, if I have like really good key lighting, if I like really make something interesting in my backdrop, you know, I think more people are going to be, you know, interested in what I'm doing and saying, because it just generally looks more professional, right?
Your production needs to be good. Podcasts have notoriously bad production. I'm amazed at how many podcasts I look at, even ones that are like pretty popular. I'm like, this looks like garbage. It sounds like garbage.
Right.
Like, good on you for getting views, but like, I mean, people expect higher production these days, you know?
They definitely do. And you're right. Like, they're getting like these big views. And I think it's almost like they've been grandfathered into it.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. But you know, I would say, you know, that the future looks like, yes, like let's start taking this more professional, like let's take this seriously, because, you know, then there's a marketplace for us to actually continue to grow revenue based on, you know, just content, because digital content's not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. Like, it's grown at such an exponential rate over, you know, the course of like 2 decades. And, you know, that's going to kind of set the benchmark. And hopefully what we're doing as a company will help like set that benchmark for what like studios will look like, how they'll actually like work, because you know, profitability is also all about like having a good workflow. And I don't like to, well, we don't like to complicate the process by throwing in unnecessary technology and like making it inaccessible for the everyday user. You know, for me,
like this thing's perfectly easy to use. Anybody could use this.
Exactly.
It's the Rodecaster Pro.
Right. Yeah. But those same people, when you say anybody, are intimidated by that because it's new, it's scary. There's a lot of knobs and faders and, you know, and so if our job is to educate the client, and if our job is to make the client feel comfortable in their space, you know, we don't need to exasperate that by adding more bells and whistles that don't really add much to the production, like, or the workflow.
More tried and true, rather than like you're not gonna every time something new comes out and like just get wild with it. There's no reason to get too wild with it.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and there's so much great equipment out there. We've partnered with certain companies as well, as kind of our go-to, you know, lights and, you know, acoustic panels and things like that. Just because it's like it's easier for us to be able to say, hey, you know, certain things that may not be on camera, let's like kind of standardize that. You know, there's so much stuff you can get lost in like a flood of gear. Like, I'm a gearhead myself. I've got like a million guitars and mics and stuff sitting at home. But no, you know, like at the end of the day, it's kind of funny because like I have all that stuff and I never use it. Like, even when I had my recording studio, I had like amps, a wall of amplifiers, and like snare drums.
You saw how many pedals I have out there.
I saw everything.
I got crazy with the pedals. I was almost just collecting them at some point because like you can only use so many.
Yeah,
of them.
You've got 2 feet, man. Like, and you can't even use both at the same time unless you're sitting. You know, so yeah, same thing stands true with doing, you know, a podcast. It's like you've got a mic, you may or may not have headphones. You've got a way to uplink to, you know, whatever streaming service you want. And then, you know, a couple of things here, you know, your camera and lens and everything. But then from there, it's like the rest is all on you. You know, the rest is all on you know, as good as the studio could look, the common denominator is the host, the person.
The host and your ability to market and promote. Because honestly, I mean, I feel like a lot of people can have really good podcasts, but you got to find a way to get it out there. And I feel like you have to do it if you're not a celebrity, because you're competing with celebrities, you know, I mean, that's the tough part. Most of people that are successful at podcasting are a company like NPR, or already have a name, you know, so the other people can make their way up. But I feel like, I mean, I talk to people about it. It's just like, you have to do it for a long time, maybe years before you get any breakout, but that's the kind of investment you have to put into. That's what you're in for.
For sure. Yeah. And you know, time, I wouldn't say time and success are mutually exclusive, right? You know, if you're doing a podcast that's like content that's been done over and over and over again, you're probably not going to see the same amount of success as somebody who's been doing it way longer, that already has the viewership and like followers and stuff.
They've got it fine-tuned. They know what they're doing.
Right. I mean, you can you can essentially have your own thing going on, but you're always going to be kind of trailing behind unless something magic happens and everybody just, you steal all their viewers and like, hey, this guy's more interesting, or he's funnier, or I feel like I know him better. You'll generally see there's definitely other podcasts out there that are coming up with information that people want to talk about, whether it's nuanced towards like their personality or like a subset of a subset that no one's talking about.
Yeah, like mine, I just love Austin and I love the city. So this podcast is, I only do people in Austin, you know what I mean? Like I might interview someone else who's in town visiting or whatever, but it's mostly just like, you're a guy in Austin, you do work here, you have a company here.
Yeah.
Because I think that's cool. It keeps it local,
Yeah, I thought about doing a podcast myself, which is like,
but you don't even listen to podcasts.
I don't even listen to podcasts.
But you could do a podcast.
And I was thinking about it. I was telling a buddy of mine, I was like, hey, would you be interested? He's another videographer in town. I was like, what if we do, and nobody steal this, please, but what if we do a podcast about like the people behind the scenes? Like,
well, no one would be better at that than you and your team. So I don't think anyone can steal it.
Right. Well, and I'm talking about like, we have tons of podcasts about, musicians and artists and stuff like that. But like, what about the people who are like behind the camera, right? Mm-hmm. Like the people making the music videos or making the content.
I feel like I'd listen to that podcast, dude. That's interesting.
Right. Or even like having a podcast about podcasters, like, like just tell me like your journey about getting into podcasting. Like, like when did you figure out you needed headphones? Like what was the moment it just like dawned on you like, hey, I'm missing something here.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe we'll do that when I have time, but I'm literally working like 16 hours a day. This is actually a treat for me to be able to step away.
Well, thank you so much, because we were texting every week. You're like, oh, too busy this week. Too much work, man.
Right.
And then it was like, I follow up next week. All right. Yep. Still too busy, dude. But you made it, man. I'm glad you did.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah. Is there anything, we're at an hour. Dude, the whole story is great. And I love your focus on like helping other people and kind of, you have a passion behind your company. You know what I mean? Like you're doing it for the right reasons. Is there anything else we want to cover? I mean, well, one, how long you been in Austin?
Oh man, like 17 going on 18 years.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I mean, city's changed a lot, right?
Oh hell yeah, dude. Last podcast I was on, they were talking about that. They were out of Nashville and like, trying to get a sense of what Austin was and what it's turning into. And it's kind of hard. Like I'll kind of compare it to this, like, Austin is kind of like when you're like a chubby kid and then you just kind of grow up over time and like you don't realize like, oh wait, I've hit my growth spurt and now all of a sudden I'm tall and skinny and like muscular. Like it happened over like the 18 years I've lived here. So it's not like I can't even fully remember what Austin was like 18 years ago. I remember like aspects of it, but look, like now everything's so normalized. You go downtown and you see all the like the new buildings and apartment high rises and all that stuff. So like it's all just kind of turned into, what it is over time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not mad at it. It's a lot of opportunity for everybody here. Yeah. So anybody who's upset, hey, don't be like the guys who hated my red room. Like there's change,
I fully agree. There's change. You just got to embrace change and make the best of it. I mean, you can look negatively at anything if you get creative enough about your negative thinking.
Yeah, for sure.
So we'll wrap this up. But one more thing I'll ask you is just kind of like, what is one of your favorite spots in Austin that if someone was out, they might run into you?
Favorite spots?
Yeah.
Man.
Could be restaurants, bars, could be a golf course, whatever.
You know what? Like usually my wife and I hang out over at like Yard Bar.
Okay.
Just taking our dog out there, just hanging out, just because like they got food, they've got dogs.
They got dogs, yeah.
It's a bar.
It's a bar.
There's like 3 favorite things,
yeah.
So yeah, check it out. Yard Bar is cool.
All right, shout out to Yard Bar. Dude, Matt, thank you so much. This was awesome. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, man. Happy to be on here. Thanks.